Hi everybody, I just thought I would share a few thoughts on the Epstein case and this alleged suicide. Now, my friend Harry shared this with me on my Facebook, and I shared it on my Facebook as well, and we both said we don't know what the source is, whether it's true or not, but this is what's out there, and it's from somebody who's decided to stay anonymous, and it says not saying anything after this. Please do not try to dox me. I think, like, find out who he is, but or she is. But last night after 0:15 a.m, so 4:15 a.m. in the morning count, they took him medical in a wheelchair, front cuffed, but not one triage nurse says they spoke to him. Next thing we know, a trip van shows up, ? We do not do releases on the weekends unless a judge orders it. Next thing we know, he's put in a single man cell and hangs himself. Here's the thing, the trip van did not sign in, and we did not record the plate number, and a guy in a green dress military outfit was in the back of the van, according to the tower guy who let him through the gate. You guys, I am shaking right now, but I think they switched him out. Now, it transpires when I get onto the last American vagabond here, Ryan. Suddenly, he's put out this live stream covering this Epstein death, and he gives more information about this piece here. He gives more information about this, which he explains that actually this was posted on Chan 4 10 minutes before the story had broke officially in the news and on other networks. So this was out there 10 minutes before the story broke, and so it appears to be from somebody who worked at the prison, and it appears to have been written very quickly because it obviously didn't take long for the news to get out, so he's written it very quickly. You can see by the way it's written, they took him medical in a wheelchair. It's giving as much information as possible, but without going into too much detail. Okay, he's put in a single man cell and hangs himself, but he's giving the important details, isn't he, or she, giving the important details. And given the nature of this type of crime and the power of the criminals that are alleged to have been involved in all of this, then, obviously people are scared. People are afraid. You're talking about very powerful people that get involved in this type of stuff, and they will stop at nothing. So, that's how they operate, by fear tactics, silencing people. Like, for example, Jimmy Savile. So many people knew. Everybody says, why didn't anybody do anything? Why didn't anybody say about it? Who knows how many people were bought off, threatened, all kinds of things. Now, Last American Vagabond, who you can always rely on, Ryan, to bring top quality information, well researched. Where he isn't sure, he'll tell you, we're not sure about this, but this is what's being sent to me. Absolutely top quality presentation he gives here as well. Somebody sent him these two images, which is, the one on the left hand side is really an image of Epstein in his younger days. It's not a recent, it doesn't look like a recent image of Epstein. But when you look at the two images there, you can see the ear is circled in red, and it appears the earlobes are different. Though when I look at it, he's got something around his neck, the cadaver, picture of the cadaver, he's got something around his neck, under his chin. Is it squashing his ear up, you know? But the earlobe shape and the inner ear itself does look very, very different. There's a bit of similarity there, but it does look very different. I think what struck me most with the picture of the cadaver is the different shape of the nose. And Ryan suggests, well, you know, he could have damaged his nose in the course of committing suicide. There seems to be a bruise on the face of the cadaver. But what caught my eye was, you know, not just the nose, also the distance from the hairline to the eyebrow seems to be longer on the cadaver than on the picture of Epstein. And that's something that really age, I don't know, maybe he has lost a bit of hair from the side of his head. You know, though to say that the hair actually looks thicker on the cadaver than it does on Epstein, the picture of Epstein alive. But the main thing I noticed was the eyebrow. You know, the eyebrow seems very much more higher up than Epstein's eyebrows. And also the length between the top of the bridge on the brow, the bridge of the nose, it is a lot shorter on the cadaver than it is on the picture, the profile picture of Epstein on the left. You know, there's a lot more depth from the bridge of the nose to the corner of the eye on Epstein's photograph than there is on the photograph of the cadaver. So they're slight subtle differences, but obviously they take care if as has been suggested by the anonymous posting on Chan 4, they've switched him, then they would have found somebody that at least does look like him, or will have taken steps to make sure that it can pass off as Epstein. Now, this other video here, and I will leave you the links to this, you know, I do strongly advise you to watch both of them, but especially Ryan, Last American Vagabond, which he just gives absolutely spot on coverage of so many issues, and especially stuff like this. Now, this image was shared on Convo Couch. These two guys who give, again, an excellent presentation, discussion about what's happening here. But you can see that there is something around the lower half of his neck here. So that's why I was saying, you know, was his ear squashed up with this thing around his neck, and so it's made his ear distorted. But what grabbed my attention on this photograph was the colour of his skin. Now, I know he's dead, and dead people usually are pale, but a tan is a tan. A suntan doesn't disappear the moment somebody dies. Not as far as I know, anyway. And I was looking at this torso here, and the arms, and the hands, and even his face, really. This person does not look like somebody who's spent any time whatsoever in the sun for quite some time. You know, he looks like he hasn't seen a day of sun for years. I mean, don't forget, Epstein, prior to his arrest just a few months ago, he'd been, was it in the south of France, the Mediterranean. He was very, very tanned. And I've got a couple of images up here of Epstein. You can see on the right hand side. That's from his very much younger days, okay? But he is quite tanned, you know. Look at his face, look at his arms, how dark they are. And then this other picture here, the top one and the one second row to the right, you can see, I mean, he's very, very dark skinned. These are more recent pictures of Epstein. you can see how very dark his skin is. And especially his neck. So if his face is that dark, you know, his arms are going to be dark. Was he a guy that never got a full body tan? I somehow doubt it. I somehow doubt that Epstein did not have a full body tan. And as I say, you can see the images of him, more recent images, how dark he is, how much fatter his nose is even. You know, I mean, he's aged. So I do find it a bit, I find it suspicious that this person looks, you know, that pale. But the point that I wish to make in this video now, it isn't just these anomalies with the photographs, okay? Because, you know, regardless of whether he did commit suicide or whether he was switched out, as has been suggested by this, well, we suppose prison guard who was there, who witnessed these things, regardless of whether he is actually dead or whether he was switched, the important point is that now the authorities are saying the trial's over, so there's going to be no trial, and it's up to the victims to bring civil cases against other suspects. Now, that cannot happen. That cannot happen, you see. And I'm going to explain why it cannot happen, and why the American people need to stand up and stand firm, stand your ground. Because we're talking about an issue of national security here. We've already had Acosta explaining, as Epstein's lawyer, that he was working for intelligence, and according to the information that I've received, research, it looks like he had connections with Mossad intelligence, and that he was engaged in honey trap operations, which, you know, getting entrapment, getting evidence on people, and then these people get put into high office, into offices of power throughout America, throughout where? Because Epstein's Epstein's connections are international. And we're talking about a very high level of organised crime. We're talking about trafficking children. We're talking about illegal drugs, money laundering, perhaps selling of illegal weapons, of putting criminals into positions of high power as yes men. And then you look at the military actions that have been happening, that America's been involved with, that the American people are suffering through poverty, austerity, you name it, all their services being cut. And meanwhile, the country has just given over $1 trillion to the Pentagon, and now the threatening war with Iran, you know, after all these other wars that have... And how have these wars benefited the American people? How have they benefited the American people? Really, in no way whatsoever. But the American people are paying for them, and they're suffering for them, and they're losing their children to these wars, who are serving in the military. So we're talking a very, very high level of crime going on here. And they think that because one of the prime suspect is dead, that, oh, that's it, it's over, and it can all go through a civil court. Well, I think one thing, the law needs to change, that not under any circumstances can crimes against children, especially sex crimes against children, be dealt with in civil courts or covered up with out-of-court settlements and a non-disclosure agreement. Because, you know, what is the point of having background checks and stuff to make sure people are safe to work with children in a country where, if you're rich, you can abuse children and just do an out-of-court settlement and get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement? Because just because that's happened, it does not mean that that person is not still a risk to children. And that's the whole point of having background checks. But it seems that some people are going to always have a clean record just because they're rich and powerful. That's Luciferian law. We need to understand it for what it is. Call a spade a spade. Might equals right to do as thy will. Sorry, no. That's why America has a constitution, to erase that law, because right equals might to do as thy will. You see, if you're right, you can be trusted to do as you will. Your will can be trusted to be safe and lawful. Whereas if you're just mighty, then you can commit all kinds of crimes and get away with them, because money is your might, money is your power. So this is a matter of national security here we're talking about. And also, America needs to understand, the American authorities need to understand that according to the United Nations and the International Criminal Court of Justice, organised crimes against children fall into the category of crimes against humanity. Now, never can it be beholden upon individual victims to be addressing through civil courts crimes against humanity. And when these crimes against humanity involve people of intelligence in America and abroad, when it involves your top politicians, military people, people of high prominence and power and office, you talk again. This is an issue of national security. So this trial needs to continue. This needs to be a state prosecution. You cannot. The crimes against humanity, the civil courts aren't there to cover crimes against humanity and threats against national security. Because it is a national security threat of how many people were involved. Because we know for a fact that Epstein was not operating alone. Now, I've noticed in the media, a lot of the media are calling him a financier, Epstein. I'm sorry, why are you calling him financier or alleged child abuser, child trafficker? Because there's nothing alleged about it. The guy's he is a convicted criminal. He's convicted for offences and crimes against children, multiple children, organised crimes against children. Okay, so sorry, all the media calling him the financier, alleged this, alleged that. There's no alleged about it. He's a convicted child abuser, criminal. And he's known to have abused more than one children. He's known to have involved a circle of people. And he's known, according from the testimonies, and even from his little black book, that he was gathering information. And we've got Acosta himself working, in the Trump administration until very recently, explaining as Epstein's lawyer that that Epstein was working for intelligence. So we've got it from very high credible sources that this man Epstein was like the kingpin in a huge criminal network that was involved in all kinds of organised crimes, not just with abusing the children, but with drugs and money laundering and putting yes men into power, into positions of power, national security, crimes against humanity. This cannot be left now to the civil courts, and it's absolutely ridiculous that anybody could think it even could. And as I say, this thing about even with individuals committing crimes against children, this idea that they can have, go through a civil case to do an out-of-court settlement and the victims sign non-disclosure agreements, that needs to be prohibited. That needs to be prohibited. Because, as I say, what's the point of having background checks then? If rich people, what it means is that rich people are free to abuse children as they please. This cannot continue. And I speak as a CSA survivor, somebody who's grown up living with chronic complex PTSD. I know the debilitation of it, the damages, and we need to stop this now. We need to start raising healthy children and understand that a child is not just a growing physical body. A child is a developing psychology. And if you damage the psychology, it doesn't matter how perfect and healthy the body looks. There's damaged psychology, that body will be damaged. You know, I'm one of the lucky ones that I'd help. I woke up, I've been able to self-develop, learn to live with my PTSD, handle it without being dependent on a variety of psychological drugs, without ending up being addicted. You know, millions like me don't fare so well. So many are driven to suicide. So many lives broken, damaged. Tomorrow's parents of tomorrow's children, damaged. It's a very, very serious issue, what's going on with children. And it's got out of hand. We're talking about an epidemic of a psychosexual disease. And it is related to how we view children, women and children in our world. That traditionally they were degraded, insignificant. You know, the legal definition of a child as a minor human being itself implants the consciousness that we grow up with, thinking of children as unimportant, insignificant, trivial, minor. Crimes against children are a minor concern. It's major. It's major when the next generation is being attacked for no other reason than to satisfy the sexual desires of adult, perverse sexual desires of adult males mostly. But women are involved. Women are involved in this as well. And very heavily, as women have started to get the same powers of men, they are committing the same crimes as men. Because, the whole idea about equal rights for women, really, it isn't for us, both sexes to live exactly the same. That, women are somehow equal in a world that allows them to live like a man. Really, the whole point is that women need the rights to be of equality within their own femininity that has its own rights. Like, for example, really, why aren't women given an automatic break when they menstruate, And in America, as far as I'm aware, there isn't even a right to maternity leave when they have a baby. I mean, it seems outrageous to myself and to most Europeans, actually, that America can get away with that for some reason. But apparently they can. But I'm just going to give a little bit of an example here because, of why the remaining suspects, this trial needs to continue now into all the remaining suspects that are implicated. And, this is for Jane Doe against Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I know that this was withdrawn and really it was issued before Trump was made president and it was withdrawn after he became president. And, I understand that this person was terrified for her life. She was receiving death threats. It's very serious. And when we look, even Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who spoke out against Kavanaugh and, disclosed what had happened to her, what he did to her, and why she was concerned about him becoming Supreme Court judge. To this very day, she's living in hiding. We've seen the level of violence and aggression that, and it is a minority, but they're a powerful minority of Trump supporters, of what they are prepared to do on behalf of their president. They are prepared to kill, basically. We know that. So, can we really be surprised that this victim, on her totally on her own with a few people surrounding her, that she's dropped the case? That she dropped the charges. But when you read the charges here, I mean, it's really serious. And I'm just going to pick up on one point. Okay, because she talks here, this is from Trump saying, yeah, we've heard it so many times in recent months, haven't we? I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. He likes women on the younger side. He enjoys his social life. Okay? So now this Jane Doe is saying that at age 13 she'd been recruited by Epstein's, what was her name? Ghislaine Maxwell. She's been like recruited. Oh, you're going to be a model. She ends up, you know, doing sexual activities for Epstein. Though it seems she hadn't actually at that time had full-on sexual penetration with him. So it says defendant Trump initiated contact with plaintiff at 4 different parties on the 4th and final sexual encounter with defendant Trump. Defendant Trump tied plaintiff to a bed, exposed himself to plaintiff, and then proceeded to forcibly rape. During the course of his savage sexual attack, plaintiff loudly pleaded with Donald Trump to stop, but with no effect. Defendant Trump responded to plaintiff's pleas by violently striking plaintiff in the face with his open hand and screaming that he would do whatever he wanted. Okay. Now, and then it goes on, you know, apparently there's some sort of disagreement between Trump and Epstein because Epstein was supposed to, he was saving her virginity for himself, but Donald Trump took it. So there was a bit of a disagreement with them about it. So this, what he said here, that he would do whatever he wanted. Now, there's something there rings very, very true. Very, very true.
Then I have an Article 2 where I have the right to do whatever I want as president, but I don't even talk about that. It's a thing called Article 2. Nobody ever mentions Article 2. More importantly, Article 2 allows me to do whatever I want. Article 2 would have allowed me to fire him.
So it sounds
But
like
I wasn't going to fire. You know why? Because I watched Richard Nixon go around firing everybody, and that didn't work out too well. So, very simply, Article 2 would allow me to do. I could have done anything I wanted. I don't even bring it up, because we don't even get there. Absolutely, I have Article 2. It gives me all of these rights at a level that nobody has ever seen before. We don't even talk about Article 2. So, they rule no collusion.
So there you go. And then we've also got him here saying exactly, he can do whatever he wanted. He can do whatever he wanted. And from there, and again, you know, with his involvement with Epstein, again, you're going back to not just the crimes against humanity, because we're talking about, you know, a trafficked girl here. We're also talking about a guy who ends up as President of the United States, who was directly connected with Epstein, who is known to have been setting honey traps and getting yes men and yes people into positions of power. And now one of them's president. And then suddenly the guy's in court, he's on trial and all this is coming out, and then suddenly he's dead. No. Now that even shows even more the threat to national security. Because how could it happen? Really, in all reasonable common sense, how could this guy end up dead while he's in prison? In a cell on his own. And they're saying now that he wasn't on suicide watch. Really? Why not? Why not? What, just couple of weeks after he's allegedly tried to kill himself before? Or did somebody else try to kill him? I mean, and we've got that, this anonymous post here. It is a very, very serious issue. And, no, crimes against humanity cannot be dealt with through civil courts, you see. A threat to national security is not an issue for the civil courts. It's an issue for the state courts, the state judiciary. And this all needs to be heard by the state. You need state prosecution here. And the victims are witnesses. All of them must be permitted to give their testimony, including Jane Doe here, who we cannot ignore the fact of the level of threat that she was under, especially now with Epstein himself being dead. We cannot ignore the pressures that were brought on this witness and other witnesses, because there was another witness that supported what she said here, another eyewitness who supported everything she repeats it, okay, because I've read the other side of this as well, you know, the other witness in this, and she supports this, describes the same thing, and both of them, yeah, you know, she dropped the case when Donald Trump became president. What kind of pressures were brought against her, a young victim of abuse? No, we cannot just let this go and say, oh yeah, she was just lying. She was just lying. So she's dropped the case, you know, because it was all a pack of lies. If it was a pack of lies, then why hasn't Donald Trump sued her? Why isn't she in jail for telling such terrible lies? No, we cannot let this go. You can't let this go, America. You just can't. The world can't let it go. We need to know. Because we've got some serious problems going on our planet right now. And if these are the kind of people that are in positions of power throughout the world, with the Jeffrey Epsteins of this world, and all the child trafficking and money laundering, drugs money, whatever you name it, that's been going on, is it any wonder that our planet is at peril right now and nobody's doing a thing about it? Is it any wonder? Is it any wonder that the people of the world in every nation are suffering, struggling in poverty, while these rich bankers that have committed crime after crime after crime, literally robbed people and left them destitute, are all being given big, huge bailouts and even more power, and waiting to now start war with Iran? And while America is $22 trillion in debt, but they've given the Pentagon another $1 trillion. The Pentagon that's lost $21 trillion over the course of 20 years. They can't account for $21 trillion they've had. That is as much as America's debt. And they've just received another $1 trillion. You see, all of these things, we need to connect the dots and understand what kind of psychology it is at work, and exactly what is in power, and how that psychology is pouring down in torrents from above and infecting the populace below. To the degree that people are going out committing mass shootings, that they're harbouring these racial divisions, racial hatred against people for their faith. You find whatever you can. Somebody's gay, hate them. Somebody's a woman, hate them. Somebody's a man, hate them for being a man. Hate somebody for being a woman. Oh, a child, there for abuse. There to give pleasure to rich men. That's why organised crimes against children are a crime against humanity. And that's why when it involves this level, you know, suspects of this level of power in a nation, and with such international connections, and even connected to foreign intelligence, that is a matter of national security. Okay? So, thank you very much for taking time to listen. Huge thanks to Last American Vagabond and the Combo Couch guys. As I say, I'll leave you the links to this. I'll leave you the links to the Jane Doe testimony here. And please check it out for yourself. But do speak out and do contact Congress or whoever. You know, make it known that, no, this, remind people that this we're talking about crimes against humanity and a threat to America's national security. Okay, that these are very important things. And also do pick up on this idea. Start asking questions now about this idea that people can commit crimes against children and it can all be just covered up with out-of-court settlements and non-disclosure agreements or dealt with in civil courts. This all needs to end. It needs to be prohibited. It needs to be a criminal offence that any lawyer will take part in a non-disclosure agreement about sexual abuse against a child. That it has to be a criminal offence, that any lawyer will participate in that. Do you see what I mean? Because we can't trust that it's just a one-off thing. You know, if somebody punches you in the face and you go to take them to the civil court and they say, oh, you know, you put your papers to their lawyers and it's like, oh, we'll settle it out of court. We don't want it going to court that I punched you in the face while I was drunk. We'll settle it out of court. We'll give you this much money. You signed the non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, that's okay. That's an individual. Is it likely to happen again? You know, probably not. It might have just been a one-off, got drunk, ended up fighting. But when it comes to people who abuse children, they are predators. So if you're rich, you can abuse as many children as you like, as long as you've got a big enough checkbook to sign, you pay off how many victims. No. And nobody's any the wiser. And you, as an individual, could end up as President of the United States with your finger on the nuclear button. Do you understand what I'm talking about here? And that's why I'm covering this, is to make these points. To make these points. So, big love to all. And I'll tell you one thing, I know that we can make this world a better place. We can and we will. Because right is the might to do as thy will.